The Bitcoin industry in which I work and spend most of my time has the same exact issue. They just are obsessed with quote number go up. That's what they are. That's basically what they're selling, which I think has diminished the Austrian basis of Bitcoin from where it comes. If you read Satoshi's earliest writings, like in the Genesis block, rather in the code itself, he references the bailouts. We see now post COVID that we're in essentially we're post Keynesian. We're now in a monetarist society. So our governments are not concerned about the debt ceiling. Of course, we're coming up against the debt ceiling once more in October. It'll be raised most likely until the point that it's not quite sure if we're there yet. And so this, I think, does push us towards having to broaden our view of all of these assets. Simply having them is a choice that we make to take our money elsewhere. And it may come further down the line, probably quicker, maybe in certain parts of the country than in others, where you're able to go and exchange your silver for food or energy or your Bitcoin. And I think that I purchased GoldSilverBitcoin.com in 2012 kind of with this vision in mind, that it's our choice. That's the tagline I picked, that it's our choice to either kind of exist in these financial markets or choose alternatives and create alternatives in the case of Bitcoin. But of course, now there is this gold versus Bitcoin mentality, which I think we need to move beyond as well. First of all, it's nonsense. The axiom from which a gold versus Bitcoin debate would begin mischaracterizes both of these assets in terms of what they are seeking to achieve. In Bitcoin's case, of course, it was an alternative based on some of the early writings and the early adherents or hodlers in Bitcoin as an alternative to central banks and modern monetarism as we're seeing today. Silver too, there's a lot of overlap there. I came to Bitcoin from the gold and silver industry. I worked in a shop, and essentially probably as early as 2010 or 2011, there was weekly conversations about Bitcoin. Now, there's a lot of skepticism about Bitcoin for many reasons, many of which were valid, some of which maybe a misunderstanding, but I think from a broader picture, very valid. And that's my point. Now, gold versus Bitcoin is a misnomer. Really, they're just part of the same basket, in my opinion, in many ways. So Bitcoin's shortcomings may very well be experienced should we have infrastructural issues in the US, for instance. You might not always have the internet to access. And if that's the case, then it's going to be much more difficult for you to convince somebody to accept your Bitcoin. It's going to be much more difficult to access your Bitcoin. Now, we might have like mesh networks, et cetera, in which transactions could take place, but how many people are going to have the knowledge to access those networks? In fact, I bet most of the people holding Bitcoin will be holding their Bitcoin on exchanges, which they won't have any access to, perhaps. Silver is a completely different story. It could be theoretically seen as an insurance to one's Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin scene doesn't see that because they don't see the bigger picture and they're not discussing this bigger picture. They're not broadening their mindset. And I think that if we did that, we would see the thesis for a crypto Bitcoin, I don't want to go into crypto, Bitcoin and kind of precious metals portfolio will be more clearly seen. And of course, people might want to have 80% in metals and 20% in Bitcoin or none, or vice versa. However, this gold versus Bitcoin, I think, is a debate which misses how dire of a situation we could find ourselves in economically in the next 10 years. Thoughts on that?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but you were pretty consistent with what you said. First of all, I'm free market, so you can do whatever you feel is right for you. But as you outlined, Justin, first of all, what are the similarities? And this is my opinion. So, David says what I think. I'm sort of talking off the cuff, although I've given thought to the metals most of my life and Bitcoin certainly for quite some time. So they're both outside the system. So that's something that's the biggest similarity. It's something that's not really under the banking control. And, in the case of the precious metals, they've been known as, monetary instruments for thousands of years. Bitcoin, of course, is new. Bitcoin has advantages from portability. I mean, it's a lot easier to take $1 billion in Bitcoin anywhere in the world than it is that much physical gold. I do think that there shouldn't be a war between them. You can't, in my opinion, it's not a Bitcoin or gold. It's a gold and what else? I think that Bitcoin being the leader, the first off the early paper, which I'm glad you referred to, what the overall achievement was. And Bitcoin, to me, much more so than gold. And some of my followers may be upset, but as you know, Justin, I speak my mind. I'm not here to win a popularity contest. Bitcoin has reflected the MMT, which I'll shout out to one of the greats, Jimmy Rogers, modern money theory, and he calls it more money today, which is a more accurate phraseology. So as we see this continuing disregard for this modern money theory, which is proven again and again and again to not work, well, this time it's different and it's going to work. And so far it's kind of working. And you see that reflected in the price of Bitcoin. And this, of course, is what many that may or may not understand the philosophy behind it and are seeking price appreciation may participate in. And you don't have to know any asset, to invest in it. And, sometimes, I got to digress for just a moment, Justin, but I had a friend that got the symbol wrong on a certain stock by one letter. And so they invested in, a different company than they thought they were buying. And that it just took off. And the one that was recommended was sitting there doing nothing. So kind of blind luck. So I digress to come back. The point is that you can invest on a rumor or a hunch or the chat room or whatever and do quite well, or do the same thing. And you can study your brains out and make a mistake investing. So, but I got off track. My point is, I think you can own both. I think what the balance is determined by you. I think if you're really young and aggressive, you could favor more of the electronic version. I am old school and I'm more comfortable. I don't need to lose anything at my age. I rather have the stability of, like you outlined, maybe an 80-20 or 80-90-10 because of me. That's what's right for me. But what is right for me isn't right for Justin. And this is where you have to use your thinking. But I think having all your eggs in one basket is something that's simply a bad choice. I also think that to not have anything outside of the conventional financial system is even a bigger mistake. So in other words, if you don't own something outside the system, like some type of crypto, gold or silver, or maybe let's say a pile of plywood that's protected as an extension of that idea, but something that is of value, preferably something that's of value to multiple millions of people outside of the system, there could be a price to pay. I think there will be a price to pay, and I think it's coming sooner than later.